All right, starting my timer. Here we go. We thank you, organizers, for holding this space. And I'm so flattered to be among these presenters. Good morning. Well, it's morning here in Healdsburg, California, and the land of the Pomo people. I need to acknowledge that, as well as acknowledge the students who have made me the teacher and junior researcher that I am, especially those who have lost their lives too young. Alex, Juan, Austin, Lalo, Carl. But I acknowledge those students who have been perpetrators as well, as no child is born a murderer. This presentation is dedicated to all of you. The setting of my research was the juvenile hall carceral classrooms where I teach, and those of my colleagues who I interviewed, and the classrooms from which I collected artifacts, like this student's freehand drawing of his room. I use the term carceral to affiliate with a critical perspective. This term, as many know, comes from Michel Foucault. He used it to refer not only to institutions of confinement, but also practices that track people before and after their contact with the justice system. My literature review, including G and others in the critical discourse field, established that words have power. Thus, I do not use the euphemistic secure settings or corrections that my work may be indexed under. These classrooms must be understood as existing on a spectrum of classrooms along an exclusionary continuum, often referred to as the school to prison pipeline. I believe, as Michelle Alexander wrote, that, quote, mass incarceration operates as a tightly networked system of laws, policies, customs, and institutions that operate collectively to ensure the subordinate status of a group largely defined by race. My practitioner experience has taught me never to underestimate the insidious embeddedness of the mechanisms at work. Some students cannot be portrayed as being unfairly accused in real time when they are openly advocating hurting each other, but what brought them to this point is complex. Can I take credit for not joining a gang, as due to my privilege it was never suggested to me? Moving on to my methods. Mine was a qualitative practitioner inquiry research. I chiefly conducted interviews with practitioners in my department, as well as collected documents, artifacts, and recordings of my practice. COVID distance learning opened up a rare opportunity to capture my practice with an IRB exemption. Student voices in my headphones, the Otter application only recorded and transcribed my voice. For analysis, I used Saldana's open coding, especially in vivo and descriptive codes. As I focused on strategies, objectives, and perceptions, I used dramaturgical verses coding to help me analyze. Quirko's data analysis software enabled me to arrange my codes in a landscape, and while my research questions focused on what curriculum material was accessible to the students, my analysis unveiled a polarized dynamic inextricably entwined with this question. The Quirko's landscape showed distinct regions. One region, should be on the right side of your screen, reflected material relating to law enforcement. In naming this region, I kept in mind Mullet and G, alerting us to the importance of language in supporting or disrupting hegemonic structures. I decided on La Jura, after consultations with an urban anthropologist. La Jura is one of Chicano border culture's creative adaptations of Mexico City's slang term La Juda, short for Policía Judicial. Specifically, it straddles law enforcement's preferred officer and my students' preferred pigs. Ample material identified a second zone, encompassing the drugs, gangs, and violence in students' communities, households, and personal lives. Really, this realm is everything that must stay secret from La Jura. Its boundaries are largely defined by being on the losing side of a binary opposition. As Derrida warned, such binaries always privilege one over the other. This was called the outlaw zone for many reasons. First, I wanted to honor Audre Lorde's outlaw emotions, described by Paris as emotions, quote, denied to marginalized groups, precisely because emotions challenge cultural hegemony and open avenues for social change. Additionally, outlaw has this Billy the Kid connotation, which supports a critical lens by evoking the manifest destiny genocidal era that established the power of the badge in these lands. Finally, although not conspicuously lauding, outlaw has enough of a positive connotation that my students reading my work would not feel this element of their lives being outright stigmatized. Finally, my findings identified a third realm, the carceral classroom, as a heterotopia, which Foucault wrote about in 1967 as a kind of place outside of all places. This space brings together the incompatible cultures of Hura and outlaw in a suspended space of possibility. Foucault identified ships as the ultimate heterotopia. The metaphor that emerged was the juvenile hall classroom as a heterotopic spaceship carrying passengers from polarized planets. And I hope it does seem weird to compare the carceral classroom to the USS Enterprise, because our national practice of incarcerating young people is statistically weird. We incarcerate youth at a rate 3 times that of any other quote unquote developed nation. Again, I must rely on Mullet's ideas that language maintains and legitimates hegemonic boundaries. I will not use the term highly transient populations. Instead, I will share that students get beamed on and off this ship at any time, having serious implications for conducting classroom business and for the humanity of the people involved. Yes, my findings reflected the struggle to maintain rigor in this setting, but I especially found teachers constantly faced with the choice to affiliate with either Hura or outlaw. I found that teachers often parrot the terminology found in Hura handbooks, like accountable and appropriate, which risks alienating the student who has taken an outlaw stance. On the other hand, I found teachers able to position themselves as liminal figures in this heterotopia, trying to place these incompatible regions on equal footing. My findings hint at the positive effects of the teacher placing themselves outside of this binary, and my findings create a call for further study. Indeed, there's a paltry selection of critical carceral classroom studies. This area is ripe for research, and I hope my academic colleagues will rise to the occasion. I certainly will, because I owe it to my students, Alex, Austin, Juan, Lalo, Carl. I hold this space for you. Thanks very much for listening.